Dad talk, dad talk. Everybody loves dad talk, dad talk, dad talk. Everybody loves dad talk, 'cause we love dads.
Hi there, and welcome to Dad Talk. This is put on by the IWK NICU Dads group. These are a video series put on by former dads in the NICU and some of our neonatologist staff. This is videos for dads that are presently in the NICU to offer a bit of support. This month's video is going to be based on life outside the NICU or life after the NICU. So in this video, we have myself, Sean Smith. We have James Whitehead, another father of a former child in the NICU, and Dr. David Simpson, one of the neonatologists at the IWK in Halifax. So a bit about myself. I had my son in the NICU 3 years ago. My son Eli, he was born at 24 weeks, so 16 weeks premature. At the time he was born, he was about 1.5 pounds. So we spent 16 weeks, I think it was, in the NICU. Had plenty of ups and downs while we were there, but are happy to have our little boy home now for 3 years. And James, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is James Whitehead, and I'm one of the parent partners with the dads group at the IWK, the NICU IWK. And I had a little girl named Tessa in the NICU about 7 years ago. At the time, she was born at 28 weeks, and she came in at, I think it was 1,330 grams, which was like just under 2 pounds. She was just under 2 pounds. I remember I could take my hand and put it over all of her. And I don't have very big hands, but I've got a picture of my hand in the incubator, and she's basically being completely covered by my hand. She was so tiny. And like Sean, we had ups and downs. I think one of the ways that we often describe our experience in the NICU is 1 step forward, 2 steps back. A lot of the time, at least that's what it felt like. You'd have good days, you'd have bad days, and it was really just sort of taking things one day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time, and so that was about 7 years ago. She's doing well now. She's doing great. She's smart little kid. She's at going to school, and we also have 2 other little girls, Vivian and Allison, and they were both term. Well, almost. Vivian was a little bit early, but not much, and then Allison was pretty much term. So yeah.
Excellent. And our Neo this week or this month, Dr. David Simpson.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Dr. David Simpson. I'm, as you said, one of the neonatologists at the IWK. I've been a staff person there for almost a decade now, but time before that as a resident and a fellow, so a lot of years in the NICU, but all on the medical side of things. I am a dad. I've got a 10-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter, but both were born almost at full term, 38 weeks plus, and both very healthy and both only in hospital for a couple days. So interestingly enough, I got to actually look after both Eli and Tessa, but I had the easy job because I wasn't the parent, I was the doc, and so I got to come in the morning and go home in the evening and have some downtime, unlike you guys who lived and breathed the dad experience in the NICU.
Yeah, we're very happy that you were doctor for both of our kids when they were in the NICU. I think you were the doctor. Well, actually, you gave us our discharge from the NICU. I remember.
Yeah.
last our discharge rounds, which were fantastically informal. At that point, since he was good, he was plenty well grown. I think at discharge I want to say he was 7 pounds or so, and he was doing pretty well at discharge. It was great. It was just, yep, he's big now, he's doing good, and he's breathing on his own. Loved those rounds. Those were the best rounds that we had.
They're one of the nicest ones I get to do too. When you're finally like, you've reached the end of that marathon, you actually get to go home. Families are, again, it's totally understandable that families are often like, thanks for all the good care. We hope we never see you again. But it's great to be able to send people home, especially after such a long, as you say, up and down kind of day.
Yeah. But I imagine, now I can only speak for myself, it's not always the case, though, that after discharge from the NICU that it's just you're done with the NICU and you hopefully never have to see the IWK again. I know that in our case, we still have plenty of follow-up appointments that we needed to attend, medications that my son went home on, for example. So my son Eli, I think for the first 3 or 4 months, he had at a minimum weekly appointments from just his family doctor for weighings and checkups, nephrology he had to go in for. He had issues when he was in the NICU with his eyes, so we need to have those checked out a few times. And actually, that was one of the funnier appointments after discharge was when he was 2 years old. I got to take him to get his eyes checked, and so they do the full dilation. And at the point, he's a 2-year-old, so he's rambunctious. He's ready to go. He just wants to run around. And so actually, they did the dilation, and they're saying, "All right, now wait half an hour, and then we're going to come and actually check the eyes." But you can't really tell a 2-year-old that your eyes are dilated. Things are going to look funny. So, and so he was just sprinting up and down the hallways of the hospital the whole time. And I'm thinking, you are almost blind right now. What are you doing? I'll never forget seeing this little child just trying to run straight, but just keeps turning up to one side or the other because he can't really make out what's going on. It's all just a big bright blur. One of the funnier post NICU IDPK stories I'd say I have. James, I'm hoping you have a few funny ones as well.
Oh, yeah. Actually, the whole eye thing. Tessa had to go get her eyes checked as well. Tessa loved her follow-up appointments, so she was in the perinatal follow-up program. So she was there she had like milestones and stuff that she had to. There was so many appointments after we were out of the NICU that a lot of them kind of blurred together for me, because there was so many. There was eye appointments, there was nutrition appointments. That was a big one. And it was all about, how much was she eating, and a lot of it just had to do with how much she was eating, and then what was Leah eating, because she was breastfeeding. And then as time went on, then it became, what is she eating? So she was, those appointments went on for like 3 years or something. So you really got to know the people in the perinatal follow-up program, and it's like this whole team. And every time Tessa would come in, they were always like, Tessa! They were like her best friends. She loved it. I think the big thing that I remember was milestones. And there was all these milestones that we were looking for, but at the same time, the milestones weren't set in stone. It was always, milestones are going to be different for every child. And so we have them there so that, we have something to gauge against, but we were always encouraged not to think of them as, if they don't meet this milestone at this particular time, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. We see the follow-up program will follow high-risk NICU graduates for the first 3 years, and one of the purposes is to monitor their developmental progress, because we know if children are running into issues, if we intervene with therapy services earlier, you get better functional outcomes. So we do developmental testing to look at how their development is progressing in different areas, and whether they're quote unquote on track with their development. And you're exactly right that although there are sort of classic milestones that we teach, everybody's different, every baby is different, and not everyone does everything at the exact same age as everyone else. So there's always a bit of a range. Some people are going to walk a little bit early, some people are going to walk a little bit late. And just because you're walking a little bit later doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong.
Right.
And so we try to encourage parents not to get too focused on our is my child doing X, Y, or Z at exactly the prescribed time, because often what's more important is just the overall progression. Are they progressing in a normal fashion? Or are there sort of holes or gaps or scattering of skills, which is more concerning than if there's something that's a little bit later than the average.
Right.
Right. I remember that was something that came up with us with perinatal follow-up, and physiotherapy as well. Was Eli was very, very good at fine motor skill very early on. He was able to pick up small pieces, manipulate them very well, but gross motor skill, it's not that he wasn't on track, but he wasn't as advanced with that. And so when we would look at the grading in physio or in perinatal follow-up, his worried parents would be saying, well, he's doing great here, how come he's not doing great here? And then having to be reassured, well, he's still following the right, he's progressing forward. It's not that he's stagnating with any gross motor development or anything like that. It's just he's doing very well with fine motor skills right now. It's just the gross motor skill is developing, I don't want to say slower, but not at the same pace as fine motor skill. It's still developing. Don't worry. I found that was definitely one of the big things to keep in mind that I needed to be reminded of a few times. So I focused on, well, it says here you didn't see him roll over yet. I've seen him roll over 100 times at home, but he's just, you have to believe me, he knows how to roll over. Actually, I don't think physio has yet seen him roll over. I promise you, 3 years old, he's up, he's running, he's walking, he's jumping. He does also know how to roll over.
And really, that's just preparation for life, because in life, your children are always going to do the opposite of what you want them to do in any kind of on-camera situation. The follow-up clinic, it's a bit of a foreign environment. And so we don't always see kids at their best. We're often just seeing a little snippet in time. And so that's something that we often will talk about as well, that if we don't see something, but the family is seeing it at home regularly, the child is capable of it, even though they do it during the test itself. And so we always sort of need to keep those things in perspective. What really is more important than how you do on the test is what are you doing in real life. So what are you doing at home is really, in a way, the more important thing. But yeah, kids are. It's rare that you get the grade A performance on the first stage on camera.
Yeah, we would always practice before, because we knew it was coming up. We would always practice with her beforehand. So just so we were like, yeah, she did it. She just did it. And now, because I remember those. What I do remember about those follow-up appointments was they were very stressful at first. Like the first few were very stressful because we were very, we didn't know. That was the thing, is we didn't, looking back on it now, we're kind of like, oh yeah, she was doing great. But at the time, when you're in it, it's kind of like it's kind of in some way it's kind of like being in the NICU where you're in it, and so you just experience what you're experiencing at the time. And so I remember it was those meetings were always really stressful because you were like, well, I remember this happened in the NICU. Did that have an effect on her this way? Or I remember this happened, and did that have this effect? And so you were always trying to analyze and figure out what was,
Yeah. I would imagine it's the uncertainty too. And now you guys have been living a life together for 7 years, and the things that she's capable of and the amazing things that she can do. When you first go home, it's sort of a blank canvas, and you don't know what picture is really going to form. So I would imagine that there's a lot of just sort of worry about that unknown.
Yeah, I found we had both the same. Like you're the nervous parent going in because you try not to look online, you try not to consult Dr. Google, even though you know you're going to see actual doctors the next day or so. But you look up yourself like, what are the milestones you should be at right now? And then you're checking the results in the perinatal program, for example, and you're like, oh man, should be here. But I did find the perinatal program definitely helped kind of confirm, no, this is what you should really be looking at. Don't focus on these little things. Focus on the general trend. Is there a problem happening?
I mean, one of the things we do in perinatal follow-up is we try to, when we can, coordinate appointments. So if we know someone needs to see nephrology or say cardiology, we try to see if we can line up the appointments on the same day so that you can, at least come in and hopefully sort of bang, 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 get through them all and not have to make quite so many trips back into the health center, especially for folks that are coming from outside Halifax. Although if you're from far enough away, then sometimes perinatal follow-up comes to you in travel clinic. But it's still, it can be a lot. And so sometimes we actually will end up in discussions with families where we're trying to figure out, if too many appointments and it's overwhelming, can we prioritize, what are the things that are most important, and maybe we can back off a little bit on some of the other things. It's always kind of a balance of trying to figure out, what are the needs that the child has, and try to help a family deal with, as you say, just that sort of crazy schedule of back and forth trips that's superimposed on the life you're trying to live, of getting home and getting back to work and getting a family settled into routines.
Yeah.
I'm curious too. One of the things I remember as a new parent was, just the total change in what happens to your sleep. Was that more of a challenge, and does that account for any of the foggy memories in that?
I'm sure that didn't help.
Oh,
I know. What is it? Every 2 hours, every 3 hour feeds for probably the first few months at least. And we're going through it again now with where I have a son now that's just actually 3 months old tomorrow. The alarm clock across the room to wake you up, just because you're going to sleep through it otherwise, to remember to feed the baby in the middle of the night. And for a while, my wife had to pump as well at home. So she was both breastfeeding as well as pumping. So she had to keep an even stricter schedule. So yeah, that sleep deprivation, that definitely contributed to some of the foggy memories for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a picture of me at a family dinner a few months after we got Tessa home, and I'm holding, I think it was I don't know, some family function, and I'm sitting on a couch holding Tessa, and I'm like asleep. And, and she's asleep, I'm asleep, and they were taking pictures of me. Yeah, it was sleep was there's a lot of sleep deprivation for sure. I remember I think probably my clearest memories are of the first couple of days coming home. And I remember I was on such high alert. So we had Tessa's crib in our room, and like when you come out of the NICU, like you're used to all the beeping and the buzzing, and there's always something happening. And this was back in the days when it was all open rooms, and like you're used to having a monitor on your baby. And so and my biggest concern was that she was just going to stop breathing. I don't know why that was it. She was breathing fine, but she was, when she came home, she almost had to come home on oxygen. There was pretty, I don't know if you remember that, David, there was some talk about possibly her having to come home on oxygen. We ended up not having to, but because of all that, I was super vigilant on her. So I would wake up in the middle of the night and just go and check on her. And because I'm like, you're breathing. I can't, there's no monitor for me to tell.
Yeah, I did that for a while as well. We were saying, we ran out before we got home. We're saying, no, we're not having just an audio monitor. We need a video monitor. We need to be able to see him at all times. And the thing had him in our room for quite some time, and had the same thing where a few nights we'd wake up and just, I don't hear anything. Go over there. Is he breathing? We need to see breathing, and like doing the whole like finger to the nose trick to see if you feel his breath on your nose.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, he's good. All right, good. I need to sleep. And one of the funny things about the NICU I found for myself is I actually felt like a much more prepared parent when I got home. Because I had so much time to see my son before we were home, like under supervision, I'll say, like with a lot of support around, and able to see what he looked like on monitors when his oxygen would drop, for example. And like knowing how to recognize those signs and even like those little blips and things like that. I felt like myself going home, I was thinking, this is great. Like I know what to do. Like I've seen him go blue. So I've seen kind of the worst case scenario. These don't scare me anymore. I'm not fazed by this.
Yeah.
So yeah, myself, I felt very prepared. And I remember at the end of our stay in the NICU, like 2 or 3 days before we went home, we had friends that also had a child, and they had the the picture perfect scenario. They came in, had their child, and they were home in less than 24 hours. Just everything went as easy as can be expected. And I remember, like, they came in, they're gone, and then my wife and I are looking at each other, and we're still sitting in the NICU for a day or two, and just saying, they have no idea what they're in for. At all. We're going to go home like this. I know this kid. I know Eli. I know how he behaves. I know everything about him. They're going home with a stranger. They don't know what's happening at all. And it's their first child and our first child. I'm like, no, I got this. Them, I don't know. It's going to take them a little bit.
Were there things after you guys went home that surprised you, or anything that really stood out that you're like, wow, I never imagined that this was going to be a problem, or maybe I never imagined that this really great thing would happen? Were there any big surprises that you found?
I can't think of any big surprises, but I do recall that the first while was very weird with any conversation that I would have with somebody about my child, because I would always have to explain where he was so premature, corrected age. For quite some time that no matter how many times you would explain to some people, you couldn't really fully. You could explain as many times as you want, but you couldn't understand it for some people. And so I remember that was I would say a different part of life after the NICU, having to explain, well, yes, he is 4 months old, but really he's only 2 weeks old because he was born 16 weeks early. 4 months old, how come he's so small? Again, having to explain that math for like the first few years or so, like say a good meaning relative would buy an outfit, say, all right, so he's 9 months old, so here's the outfit. And you're saying, well, this will fit him in 4 months, but this is great. Thank you very much. Yes, but
4 months early, so he's basically just a newborn.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to be past that phase now. Very happy to be able to just flatly say, yep, he's 3.
Interestingly enough, one of the things that I remember being surprised about, and we were actually a little bit concerned about it at first, was when we started feeding Tessa real food. Because up until that point, everything was very like, she would smile and you could start to see her personality coming out and that type of thing. But I remember this one time she was eating, and all of a sudden she just started shaking her head back and forth, and we could not figure out what she was doing. Because up until then, it was like everything was almost mechanical, not in a bad way, but it was just like everything was very routine, and she had these quirks and these things, but it was very. She just started shaking her head. She was like, and we couldn't figure out what she was doing. And we went to one of our follow-up appointments, and we were like, we were all like so concerned. We were like, oh my goodness, what is going on? Is she having a seizure? Like, this is totally new. We'd never seen it before. And we went to see her nutritionist, and we were like, she's doing this thing, and we like were videotaping it, and we had pictures and everything. And she's watching it. She goes, she's just being funny. And that was it. She was just being a bit of a clown with her food. And I think that there was a shift at that point in time where it was, I didn't realize it, but I'd been kind of holding my breath right up until that point in time, because it was kind of like nothing was normal. Nothing about the NICU is normal. You don't get, I didn't get to set up my own crib. We didn't have enough time. We never had a baby shower. Like all of that stuff that you normally do, nothing was normal. And then all of a sudden it was like, and even after the NICU, nothing really felt normal. I felt confident. I knew what to do in any situation, but it still didn't feel quite normal. And then all of a sudden that happened, and it was like all of a sudden I kind of let this breath go. It was just like, okay, I think things are gonna. It was almost at that point in time, I was like, things are gonna be okay.
I find now that I'm 3 years separated from Eli being in the NICU, I've got a picture of him on the wall from the day he was born. And I look at that and I look at my son today, and I actually find it a little bit difficult to see the same child now. I know that it's the same child, but I look at them and I find it difficult to see. Like my son now, he's 3, so he's I don't know, I think 30, 35 pounds, something like that. He's a good size, and I just think, I know you're the same child, but I just cannot picture the same. Do you find you have the same thing? And David, do you find you see the same with some of the children that come into PFU? Like knowing what the child looked like in their time in the NICU, and looking at them a few years down the road, do you find some of them are also like, I know that you are this child, but you're different now.
Well, like you say, I mean, even just from size alone, they'll come into follow up and they're 3-4 times the size they were when they went home. Especially if I might not see them for their 4-month visit or their 8-month visits. The first time I might be seeing them might be a year after they were in, and so they're enormous compared to what they used to be. And oftentimes their names have changed too, because sometimes when the babies are admitted to the NICU, they're in under the mother's name, but sometimes parents will change their name and they're under the father's name, so that they come in with a different name. They're totally different size, and they're squawking and laughing and making noise and moving around, and so you sometimes oftentimes we encourage families to, if they want to sort of send in a picture and a little blurb of what's happening in their life. And oftentimes families you'll have a current picture and then a picture from those first couple of days in the NICU, and it's night and day when you're trying to it's sometimes just amazing how far the children come. But one of the things I thought too, that when you don't, it's interesting, I think, that Eli now has spent so much more of his life in the post-NICU phase. And I wonder if it feels that way. Does it feel like NICU was just a small part of his life yet?
It kind of does. I think we are transitioning to the point where NICU is becoming a bit of a distant memory, and I'm kind of bittersweet about that. NICU is definitely becoming a distant memory now, and I don't want it to be, but it was. I remember it was a real milestone. Actually, he was in for 114 days, and so I remember I had it marked out on the calendar what 114 days was home. So I could actually start saying, as of this point, you have now spent more of your life outside of the hospital than in it. And I remember even that moment was just such a kind of a big sigh of relief moment. Like, we're on the other side of this. Like, we are really starting to distance from that. Like, we are fully on the other side of the
Yeah.
That day, it was a very nice feeling, actually.
Which I think is a good encouragement for dads that might be watching this, because I would imagine that when you're in the NICU and you're going through the experience, there must be days where it feels like that's never going to come. You're never going to reach that day where you are not in the hospital, let alone spending more time outside of the hospital than in it. But Eli and Tessa are proof that you guys get there.
Yeah. Well, I can completely remember those days too. I remember, you can never say with certainty how long your NICU stay would be, because you never know what's going to happen at any point, like what kind of complications you might hit or anything like that. But I remember that the rough timeline that we were given was expect discharge around the time of what his expected due date was. So I remember also sitting there at like day 50, day 60 or so, and just doing the same thing. Like, I did the math of cutting the time in half and looking at the calendar and just thinking, we're only halfway through this. Like, we've been here for 2 months, just halfway. We still have to do this for another 2 months at least. And I remember that was very, very daunting at that time. But yeah, you're right. Distant memory is a good way to describe it now that I'm starting to not forget, but have to work a bit harder to remember some of the details of my childhood. James, your even brother separated.
Yeah, 7 years out. NICU is, there's stuff that I don't really think about or remember unless we're talking about it like in dad talk or in a dad's group, because I don't really talk about it with anybody else. And I think that, I mean, when we started doing the dad nights and doing these dad talks, there's stuff even now that I kind of I think back on and I'm like, wow, I actually have never really processed that properly. There's still stuff that I'm like, I emotionally, that I just I hadn't processed. And so I find these talks helpful because it helped, it's even 7 years out, I'm still processing stuff. It's still a distant, you're right, it's a distant memory. But it stays with you at the same time. It stays with you almost in a hidden way. And until you actually start talking it out and talking about it, it just kind of sits there. On the other side, on the other side of that, we're 7 years out, and the IWK and the NICU, and that's still very much a part of our lives, not in the same way, but because we're involved in volunteering and Leah's involvement there as well, we've built relationships and Tessa has built relationships. It's not just us. Like, Tessa has relationships with people at the IWK. Like, she loves going to the IWK, and there's certain people who she wants to go and see this person. She wants to see this person. She wants to see this person. And so she's still very connected too, but it's connected in a growing way. It's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing on the other side of it.
Very true. I'm looking forward to Eli having about the same thing where we'll go and I have to see this person. I have to see this person. We do a little bit of that ourselves. Obviously not now with COVID going on, but
Right.
the same thing. We go in for an appointment and this person's just down the hall. Let's poke our head in their office, see if they're But I think that's a good place to wrap things up. So for the dads watching, I hope you enjoyed our dad talk video this month, and we should have some more content for you guys next month. Have a good night. See you guys.
See you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. This is great. Thanks for facilitating, Sean.
Getting a bit more practice at it.
Dad talk, dad talk. Everybody loves dad talk, dad talk, dad talk. Everybody loves dad talk, 'cause we love dads. Yeah.